Application code can be perfect, and you can still be breached because of a misconfigured cloud storage bucket, an open port, or an outdated server operating system. Today, we're talking about infrastructure security scanning, what it actually covers, the cloud-specific risks most companies miss, and how to translate the results into a real remediation plan. Let's start with what infrastructure scanning covers. There are a few major categories. Network vulnerability scanning looks for open ports, outdated services, and missing patches on servers. Cloud configuration scanning, sometimes called cloud security posture management, looks for things like overly permissive identity and access management roles, storage buckets that are publicly accessible, unencrypted data stores, and security groups that are open to the entire internet. Container and image scanning looks at vulnerabilities baked into your base container images, as well as misconfigured container definitions, like containers running as root unnecessarily. And for organizations using Kubernetes or similar orchestration platforms, there's configuration scanning for things like overly permissive role-based access control, exposed dashboards, and default credentials that were never changed. Now let's talk about the cloud misconfiguration problem specifically, because this deserves its own focus. Most cloud-related breaches in recent years have traced back to misconfiguration, not some sophisticated zero-day exploit. Why does this happen? Cloud environments change constantly. Permissions accumulate over time as people come and go and projects evolve. And what starts as a temporary exception, opening up access for a quick fix, often becomes permanent because nobody remembers to close it. It helps to understand the shared responsibility model. In simple terms, the cloud provider is responsible for securing the underlying infrastructure, the data centers, the physical hardware, the core services. You are responsible for securing what you put on top of that and how you configure it. Common findings in this category include storage buckets with public read access, databases that are reachable directly from the internet, identity and access management roles with wildcard permissions that grant far more access than needed, and credentials that are no longer in active use but are still technically valid. Now let's talk about patch management, the boring but absolutely critical part of infrastructure security. Unpatched operating systems and middleware remain one of the top breach vectors, despite being, on paper, one of the most solved problems in security. The challenge usually isn't knowing that patches exist, it's prioritization and finding maintenance windows to actually apply them without disrupting the business. Asset inventory is the prerequisite here. You simply cannot patch what you don't know you have, which ties directly back to the asset management policy we discussed in an earlier episode. End-of-life software is another recurring theme in infrastructure scans, systems still running, operating systems, or software versions that are no longer supported by the vendor, meaning no security patches will ever be released for them again. So how do you go from a massive infrastructure scan report to actual action? These reports are often huge and very technical. The first step is translating them into categories. Internet-facing critical issues internal critical issues, configuration hygiene issues, and the general patch backlog. From there, prioritize based on actual exposure. A critical vulnerability sitting on an internal isolated development server is simply not the same urgency as a medium severity finding on a public-facing production system. And finally, track remediation over time. Infrastructure risk is dynamic. A clean scan today doesn't mean a clean scan next month, especially in cloud environments that change frequently. To wrap up, infrastructure scans generate a huge amount of data and very little context on their own. RiskRecap reviews your infrastructure and cloud scan results, prioritizes findings by actual exposure, and rolls the trend into your monthly risk report so your board sees risk going down over time, not just a snapshot of today's noise.